Aging is still seen as, oh, it's a natural thing. We all have to accept it. Yes, on one hand, yes. But on the other hand, more people die of advanced age than of any conditions combined. Aging doesn't mean you have to be frail and weak and bedridden and die. Aging can mean improved quality of life with mobility. And that's where stem cells come in. And I'm the biggest proponent for that. And we are in the process of conducting those studies where we can prove that with appropriate regenerative medicine techniques, we can probably delay certain issues and characteristics of aging, such as frailty and immobility. And that will make a huge difference and will make people live longer to 120, even 150 years within not too long future, maybe in the next 10, 20 years.
I was actually introduced to you through a common friend, and how we got introduced was I was sharing with this individual my experience with stem cells, right? And for the audience, you've sort of heard me talk a little bit about this before. I had to have my back done. I had to have my knee done. The next round that I want to do is the intravenous round of stem cells. And as I was sharing this with him, he was like, me too. I'm also getting stem cells, and we're going this. And by the way, and we got into, well, who are you doing with? And that's when he started to tell me a little bit about you. And I was blown away because I didn't realize that stem cells were as, call it, popular or as big in the US. I really thought it was like this Costa Rican thing. But you've been at this for a while. So let's talk a little bit about what stem cells are in the US. How easy is it for someone to get stem cells? And if they were interested in learning more about this, what are some of the things that we should know about how they work in the US versus maybe things like Costa Rica?
Well, let me start with this, Greg. So as you know, and many other people know, stem cells are not what we call FDA approved in the United States. They're not widely recommended. And the reasons for that is that there is still lack of large-scale clinical trial data supporting the concept of stem cell therapy. Having said that, however, every single study which was ever published, you name for whatever condition, from heart disease, I'm a cardiologist, to neurodegenerative diseases like multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, you name it, to hair loss or sexual dysfunction, has shown beneficial effects of stem cell therapy. So I'm convinced as a researcher, but also as a clinical cardiologist and someone who deals with stem cells on a daily basis, that this is absolutely the future of medicine. So what we have learned over the last years is basically that we are shifting away from that traditional dogma, that paradigm of what we call reactive medicine, where I'm sitting in my office waiting for someone who comes in with chest pain and then reacting towards that chest pain, to what we call regenerative medicine. And part of regenerative medicine means repair of damage, not just dealing with the results of damage as we do in traditional medicine, but we want to repair the damage, whether it's in the heart, in the brain, in the kidneys, and the skin, you name it. And that's where stem cells come in. And stem cells have the unique property and potential to develop into any tissue. That is the characteristic of stem cells. So if you expose stem cells to myocardial tissue, to heart tissue, for example, they have the ability to develop into cardiomyocytes, heart muscle cells. If you put them in the eye, they can become eye cells. If you put them in the brain, they become neurons, nerve cells. So this is the uniqueness potential of stem cells. And since we know that, we're trying to use it clinically to repair damage in the heart, in the brain, in the skin, everywhere basically. And it does work.
So how did you come across this? And then sort of follow-up question to that is, when you're treating with stem cells, what are some of the more common things that you're treating and using stem cells for?
Because how do I started with that? Well, I was among the first in the world using stem cells in experimental animals. We did, and that's in 1989, 1990, that long ago, basically, we used experimental models. For example, we used pregnant rats. We took the hearts and the stem cells of the embryonic of the embryos of the pregnant rats out, basically, and transplanted those cells into recipient rats in which we created heart attacks 4 weeks earlier. And then we measured basically the extent of the heart attacks, of the scar tissue, as well as the contractile function of those damaged hearts compared to placebo-operated animals. And this was one of the first studies, I think it was published in 1989 or early 1990, showing that two things, basically. Number one was that those cells remain in the tissue, and we could prove that by just using cells from males which had Y chromosomes and developed and into females. So if we could detect the Y chromosome, we know it had to come from those transplanted cells, not from anything else. And this was embryonic cardiomyocytes as well as stem cells. And we could also show that the contractile function, the strengths of those hearts, were improved compared to sham-operated animals. So that was basically one of the very, very first studies which ever could show that stem cells can reduce scar tissue and improve the strengths of damaged hearts after heart attacks. And that then created this enormous hype from the animal studies to go into human trials, and especially for the heart, but also for the brain. Parkinson's, for example, we all have seen patients with severe Parkinson's symptoms who had stem cells, and then the tremor was improved, the mask facies was improved, and other symptoms. There is no cure for any disease so far using stem cells, but there is improvement of symptoms and likely a reduction in the progression of underlying diseases. So, having said that, coming to your second question, so what are we using for? Well, everything is done in the frame of clinical studies at the current time because, like I said, stem cell therapy is not FDA approved. Keep in mind that the FDA is not infallible, as we learned more recently with the pandemic, of course, so that doesn't really mean that much in the research world. But of course, we want to applaud the FDA for taking care for the consumers and making sure that they are not ripped off and not undergoing anything which is unapproved but dangerous. And I'm coming to that later a little bit. But having said that, the reason why it's not approved is number one, there's not enough data yet. We are still in experimental phases. And number two, of course, there's zero industrial support. If you want to approve a new drug, for example, you have to spend minimum of $40 million and 10 years development. So, research institutions don't have that money, and they don't have the industrial support. And the pharmaceutical industry has not much interest in supporting stem cell therapy because it might
correct because it goes against their business model, right? I mean, the pharmaceutical industry.
In the frame of the studies, we treat a variety of conditions where we have study protocols. And since I'm a cardiologist, my main focus is on cardiovascular issues, which includes heart disease, of course, includes patients after strokes, but also sexual dysfunction, because it's a vascular problem rather than anything else. And we have published 2 papers in the last 2 years on erectile dysfunction in men with significant benefits of stem cells. And we did a COVID study when COVID started, followed by, there was an initial study from China done also. We did a single IV injection study, which was published shortly thereafter, which was double-blind, randomized, which showed it was not powered to show survival benefit because it was a pilot phase study, but it showed significant benefits, at least in a small group of patients who were extremely sick at that time. So besides that, as I said earlier, we treat conditions of acute injuries, for example, arthritis, muscle injuries after accidents, for example, or we treat a lot of chronic conditions such as coronary artery disease, congestive heart failure, and then in particular neurodegenerative diseases. Another thing is that what is under that big word anti-aging, and many people don't think that's something real, but it is something real because it is a scientific entity, if you wish. And we have ample evidence now that there are certain processes which lead or progress aging much faster, and we can interfere with them with different methods, with genes, with stem cells, with other things. And a lot of people just come for anti-aging therapy. It's just difficult to measure them. That's why we are doing clinical trials now where we want to measure aging of the brain, for example, and if that can be halted or maybe even reversed using stem cell therapy. Aging of the skin. I mean, I'm in Los Angeles, so in the award season, January, February, before the Oscars and all the red carpet events, everybody comes to us and they have their face injected. There's no wonder they look so good, because the stem cells rejuvenate their facial skin, build collagen, reduce the wrinkles and so on. So you see that after a week or so. So people come for that, and it works. It's not. It has been shown, but nobody has really done the scientific large-scale trials to prove it, and that's what we are trying to do. We're just trying to raise some money for that, because this is the missing part.
Yeah, well, to the audience, if there's anyone looking to make donations and support this type of research, reach out to Dr. von Schwartz and see if we could get those trials happening sooner. Look, I back to what you were talking about before. Stem cells for me have been a game changer. It is mind blowing at how powerful they are in regard to how they repair and help us get sort of younger, for a lack of a better term. This is why I'm like, I want to do as many shows as possible with different experts like you on stem cells, because people need to know about this, and back to the sort of, more traditional sort of pharmaceutical industry, like, there's no money in curing people, right? There's money in treating people. So, and modern medicine is amazing. I'm not knocking, but, we're in the future right now. And I think it's back to the whole world of biohacking and getting younger and your biological age being younger. And yeah, I know many people that have done their face and done it intravenously, and I'm sharing that's what I want to do next. So tell me a little bit about, the different types of stem cells, because, where are the best stem cells coming from? And then what are the different types of stem cells?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Greg. Before I do that, let me just say one other thing. I mean, the issue with modern stem cell therapy is that there is a large amount of business out there which is not very kosher, and that the problem for the FDA and for other regulatory instances. So, for an example, I mean, you can buy stem cells from different labs, and usually nowadays we use stem cells from donors, not from the patient him or herself. Like we started using bone marrow biopsies, fat aspirations from the patients and then use them. But nowadays we know that what we get from donors, mesenchymal-derived stem cells, which come usually from placenta tissue, umbilical cord, and umbilical blood, which is not embryonic. I would never use embryonic. I have a PhD in Roman Catholic theology. I'm completely against that. It has nothing to do with embryonic. This is just from donors from C-sections, basically. But no embryo needs to be killed for that. That's just medical waste after birth. And that material is much more potent than your or my own stem cells, because it's just, they're pluripotent, they're younger, they're healthy, they're not our age, basically. So the problem is that the vast majority of labs in this country do not follow any regulations or guidelines in the handling. And I'm a member of the International Society for Stem Cell Research, which as early as 2006 has published guidelines on the handling and manufacturing of stem cells for research purposes. And those guidelines were revised in 2021, actually. But when we started doing stem cell research and therapy 20 plus years ago, we tested every single lab in the country. And at that time, hardly anyone followed those recommended guidelines. And even now, it's the same thing. Though the problem we are seeing is you can go around the corner here outside 10 minutes from my clinic here in Los Angeles. There is those hangover infusion stories where you go in and get your vitamin
your
shot.
drips and stuff. Yeah.
The stem cells for $5,000, one IV injection. You have no clue where it's coming from. You don't know the lab. You don't know if it's not contaminated. That's something I'm seeing every single day, that people come to me, oh, they had stem cells by orthopedic surgeon XYZ in town somewhere. He got the stem cells from a lab not far from here. I know that lab. I know they're crooks. 18 people 2 years ago ended up nationwide in hospitals because of that material was contaminated with E. coli. And that's the biggest problem. And that's a problem we have seen outside the US frequently too, whether it's in Panama, whether it's in South Korea and other places of the world, that people really don't have. There's no guarantee. There is no adherence to guidelines. So that's why in the book, The Secret World of Stem Cell Therapy, I'm just making advertising for my book here, came out 2 years ago. I wrote this more as a warning, using stem cell therapy, and don't believe anything which is on Google. I mean, Dr. Google is an idiot, in my opinion. And I mean, if you Google stem cell therapy for example, sexual dysfunction, erectile dysfunction, within 0.01 second, you get, I think, 20 million hits. And if you look into that, and I did that systematically, then you see that 99% of those internet hits is pure advertising and marketing. If you look at the total number of patients who were scientifically treated for erectile dysfunction with stem cells, is less than 100, or it was less than 100 2 years ago, until we did the largest ever conducted study. So that just tells you that there's this huge discrepancy between scientific facts and data, as well as pure advertising and making often false promises. And that's where the FDA comes in and gets mad and says, oh, well, those people claim cure of this and that disease. Stem cells have never cured any disease so far. They probably will, but so far we are not there. You can improve conditions, but you have to be careful where you go, where the cells come from, and how they are treated and how they're handled and manufactured.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that, because I've heard that story as well, right? Where, in fact, someone was telling me the other day, they're like, I got stem cells, and they're telling me, I'm like, it doesn't sound like, the place that you went to was too kosher. And then I also, and I was chatting with the stem cell clinic that I worked with. The other thing you got to be very careful of is, and you could correct me if I'm right or wrong, but dead stem cells, right? Like, you're getting these stem cells, but they're not actually alive. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. I mean, they are usually, of course, not very fresh. I mean, the ones we're using, they're fresh, but because we're getting them right away as they come. But usually they're frozen, deep frozen then. And if you unfreeze them, defreeze them, basically, they are viable only for a certain period of time. So if you wait 8-9 hours or so, 80% of those cells are not viable anymore. And so it's a matter of time, really, how quickly you get them where they should go.
Cool. Well, I know we're coming to the top of the hour, and we're going to have to start to wrap up. I got a ton more to ask you, so maybe we do part 2. But what I did want to ask now is where do you see stem cell treatment going? Like, does it, you mentioned earlier, maybe it does get to the stage where it can reverse and cure disease. Is that sort of where your vision of what this type of technology and treatment can become?
I think it clearly goes to anti-aging. So, again, it's the repair which is necessary. So We all age, obviously. That's nothing we can prevent, but people age differently. And the issue which makes diseases basically is the degeneration of our vascular system and our musculoskeletal system and the brain. And aging is still seen as, oh, it's a natural thing. We all have to accept it. Yes, on one hand, yes. But on the other hand, more people die of advanced age than of any conditions combined. So aging doesn't mean you have to be frail and weak and bedridden and die. Aging can mean improved quality of life with mobility. And that's where stem cells come in. And I'm the biggest proponent for that. And like I said, we are in the process of conducting or designing at this point those studies where we can prove that with appropriate regenerative medicine techniques, we can probably delay certain issues and characteristics of aging, such as frailty and immobility. And that will make a huge difference and will make people live longer to 120, even 150 years within not too long future, maybe in the next 10, 20 years.
Wow, that's super cool. All right, last question. Considering anti-aging and like, you know, the best is it's the brain and the cardiovascular system and stuff. So when you get stem cells done, you could do them, for example, orthopedically, which is like localized. Like I had my knee done and I had my back done. But considering what you're saying, what is the best delivery mode or mechanism for stem cells? Is it intravenous or is it you locally deliver them into the brain and into the cardiovascular system?
Well, it depends. I mean, the local application for hair loss, yeah, we go directly in the scalp. For arthritis or arthrosis, we go into the joints directly because they work locally, basically. There is, on the other hand, if you give it systemically, which is, of course, not FDA approved, meaning intravenously, there's something which is called homing. So the stem cells have, for not really quite clear reasons, the ability to be attracted by damage in the body. So even if you give them systemically, they go to the places which need repair. So that's called homing of stem cells. It's not much published on that, but I'm a believer in it, and I've seen it, you know. And that's where the anti-aging therapy comes in, because the way we do it in the frame of clinical trials right now is either in the face, for example, or intravenously.
Well, if you ever need someone for clinical trials that you want to like stick up with the stem cells, you call me. I'll get my face done, my body done, whatever you need. I will happily be a case study for you.
Well, I mean, the studies are not. I mean, they're not outside sponsored, you know. So right. they're still patient sponsored, but meaning it costs money. It's not that
for
cheap.
Sure.
But that's why we are trying it. I've never done that before, but at this point, we are trying to raise funds to do those systematically conducted controlled studies to really demonstrate the potential and the power of stem cells.
Well, you know, the world needs more doctors like you, which are future thinking and, you know, taking on these types of, these medicines, which is amazing. All right. For the audience, if they wanted to get in touch with you, Dr. von Schwartz, is there a website they can go to? And as far as your book, tell us the title again and where can people pick that up?
Where there's the secret world of stem cell therapy, this is everywhere where books are sold, basically. And then the latest one is The Secrets of Immortality, which just came out a couple of months ago. And then, as I mentioned, there's another one on the bioethics of stem cell therapy coming out later this year. That's all online. And if someone wants to get in touch or consider philanthropic support for stem cell studies, of course, through the website dr.vonschwartz.com. It's my professional website.
Awesome. Well, we're going to have all of that in the show notes. So for the audience, they can click your links when they're listening to the show.
I appreciate that.
Ladies and gentlemen, to the audience, the one and only Dr. Ernst von Schwartz, thank you so much for being here today. I know you have a very tight schedule and you are on with patients now. Appreciate your time, and I look forward to potentially doing part 2 with you.
Thank you so much, Greg. I appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. You have a great day. To the audience, if you like today's episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and we will see you next week.